In order to unravel the mystery of Asema, Batman will be forced to send his son Damian deep within the belly of the beast. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop into the pages of Detective Comics issue number 1094 and find out what happens next together, shall we? Alrighty then, so picking up directly from where the last issue left off. Batman was slowly bleeding out following his run-in with Asema. Again, and some people actually complained about this in the comments of the previous video, that they felt Batman went down too easy to Asema. Personally, I was fine with it because A, he wasn't really fighting, he was trying to talk, B, he got drugged, and C, he was actually more concerned with the life of Asema's target. Which indeed continues to be true in this issue. In fact, to get himself back up and into fighting shape, Batman decides to shoot up with a bunch of crank. In fact, he basically says that this cocktail of drugs he's taking is essentially the opposite of benzos. Now, what follows after that is actually a really wonderful little scene wherein we get to see a side of Batman that I have always personally loved, yet one that rarely ever seems to get as much spotlight as it should. Of course, I'm talking about fiercely protective Papa Bear Batman, who is friends to children everywhere, in this case the dying kid that Asema had targeted last issue. Bruce loads the kid up in the Batmobile and asks him what his blood type is so he can try and keep him alive. Of course, the kid sadly doesn't know. He grew up poor and because of that didn't exactly make a lot of doctor's visits. The kid can barely keep his eyes open, and before he shirks off this mortal coil, he asks Batman to tell his mother how sorry he is for putting her through so much hardship, and for not being able to protect her from his abusive stepfather. We also learn via narration that the crime this kid actually committed that got him thrown into juvie was actually a lot more complicated than you might first assume. Basically, him and a friend went joyriding together in a stolen car. The friend who was driving ended up dying, and this poor kid had his life ruined multiple times over. And yet, despite everything this kid has been through, he's still able to be honest with Batman, saying that when he grew up, he had a Justice League poster. All the other kids were scared of Batman, but not him and his friends because, well, he's from Gotham, like them. He's one of them, basically. Thankfully, it seems like the kid will live. Batman got him to the hospital right in the nick of time, and Detective Bullock is going to be watching over him in the night to make sure Asema doesn't come back to finish the job. Not that that seems very likely. In fact, now that the good guys have played their hand, there's a good chance Asema won't end up falling for this same trick again, which sadly means Batman and the others are back to square one. With their backs against the wall and little other options left, Bruce and Damian decide to do something rather crazy. So far, the only lead they have is that Asema has been targeting young offenders who all spent time at the same juvenile facility, the facility that Scarlet Scott also just so happened to be doing business with. So the plan is simple. Damian will go in undercover with an assumed identity and try and figure out what he can find out. Maybe Asema could be a guard or a worker at the prison. Perhaps the dead boys had some friends that Damian can pump for information. I gotta say, I actually like how Tom Taylor chooses to focus on Batman and Damian's relationship in this story. In fact, it's the polar opposite of what we're actually seeing in the Batman and Robin book right now. Mainly, A, they like each other, and B, they trust each other. Hell, Batman and Damian even have a fun little back and forth too, where he basically says, "Look, son, this is a really important mission. Can you put your disdain for authority aside for a couple minutes here while we save some lives? Thanks, appreciate it." Now, as Damian ends up getting taken in for processing, we are introduced to the juvenile detention facility's warden, an absolute scumbag by the name of Slattery. He lets it be known right away that these kids are nothing but units to him, dollar signs. And should any of them step out of line and be a problem, he will be very quick with reprisal. You know, the kind that goes on in the rooms without cameras. While Damian works this case from his end, Bruce also decides to try and pose as a would-be investor into this brand new prison industrial complex project. And I mean, it makes sense. Slattery just kind of jumps to the conclusion that Bruce must hate all criminals because he was himself a victim of crime as a young boy. And oh hey, if you remember back in his Nightwing run, Tom Taylor went out of his way to try and expose the evils of cash bail, then you're gonna feel right at home here because once again the story goes out of its way to shine a light on the cruel and dehumanizing world of juvenile detention in for-profit American prisons. You know, we like to start the kids good and young, get them institutionalized right out of school. Make sure our cells are always full so we can reap those nice big fat government checks, and that's even before you get to the extracurricular evil activity that this particular prison is running. Naturally, Bruce is positively sickened by this guy, and he goes out of his way to make sure that he has a very nasty trip and hits his head on the way down so that Bruce can get Oracle inside the prison's computer system. Oh, but the socio-political commentary doesn't stop there either, as Batman also decides to check on in to see how the kid from before is doing, and even to get Detective Bullock's insight into this whole juvenile prison industry. As Bullock says, "Oh yeah, I send lots of kids to that place. Funny thing though, about 70% of them end up reoffending. In fact, they come out worse criminals than they were when they went in. Geez, you know, it's like if they're not reforming the kids and if they're not protecting the community, then like what's even the point of it?" And if I mean a relative dummy like Bullock can get it. Now back at the prison, things end up popping off at dinner time when one of the jackbooted guards almost beats a poor 10-year-old's head in for not finishing his dinner. Naturally, Damien can't help himself but rise to the occasion and play hero in this situation. In fact, he ends up leading an entire prison revolt against the warden and the guards. You might think Batman would be mad about this course of action, but quite the opposite. He ends up cracking a real smile. And why shouldn't he? His son did what he always trained him to do, to stand up for justice and to protect those who can't protect themselves. Also, a pretty important bit of storytelling as reflected by the art in these scenes. We can see the majority of the young boys locked up in this place just so happen to be black and brown, which again, if you know anything about the prison system in the United States, young black and brown men find themselves disproportionately punished for the same sorts of crimes that their white counterparts normally end up skating on. Now, in the end, Damien brings the prison uprising to a halt by heroically offering himself up for punishment on the condition that all the other boys will be able to remain unharmed. It's a hell of a gamble, but one that ends up paying off as Damien is taken to a secret torture room deep within the prison, wherein we see the warden is actually bloodletting these children and then selling the plasma off to Scarlet Scott's company, no doubt to help make that brand new formula that's allowing all her rich clients to cheat death and remain youthful. You know, it's funny, when this story started, I remember a commenter saying, doesn't this whole thing kind of have a QAnon conspiracy bent to it? I personally thought he was being a little too conspiratorial in his thinking. Then I was reminded, back in 2016, I read an article about one of the co-founders of PayPal actively founding a new startup company called Ambrosia that was basically just so him and his other rich friends could get youthful blood transfusions. Now, for the record, I haven't been able to confirm one way or another if they actually went through with it, and the FDA eventually came out and said, no, that's stupid, that wouldn't work, what's wrong with you? But don't worry though, that PayPal guy decided to get into politics. In fact, he both financially backed and philosophically mentored the man who is now the Vice President of the United States. Okay, now who's getting conspiratorial? Only, you know, this is information that you can easily Google on your own if you don't believe me. Later on, Batman breaks into the prison to help spring Damien. They compare notes, and once again, Damien, who really takes a level in heroic in this issue, doesn't want to leave just yet. He wants to stay behind to protect the kids. Batman swears that they will free all the kids once this case is closed. Though, interestingly enough, when they return to stately Wayne Manor, the case ends up taking another very unexpected turn, as it seems Asema has left them a letter. One wherein she claims to explain the whole story. And hey, isn't that the very same gate that Scarlet Scott and her mother saw a young Bruce through back in the day? I wonder. And so that was Detective Comics number 1094, everybody, and I gotta say, Tom Taylor was really cooking with this one. You can tell the whole prison reform pulled from the headlines thing is very important to him, and his passion can really be felt in the work itself. More than anything, though, I think what I really appreciate about this story is how Damien is handled here, especially considering how poorly I think he's been handled over in the actual Batman and Robin book, where his character has super regressed. Here, though, we see a Batman who's proud of his son, who trusts him, and vice versa, and honestly, it's just really nice to see. And honestly, I think this is exactly what this arc needed when we stop and consider all the dark and unpleasant themes that they're tackling here. It's nice to have a story wherein Batman, you know, wants to be friend to children everywhere, and fight injustice and corruption on multiple levels, not just out on the street, but behind closed doors as well. Overall, I think I would feel comfortable giving this one a 9 out of 10. This might actually be the high point of this new series, and if Tom Taylor can nail it all in the finale, I think we're going to end up with one hell of a storyline. Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest. That's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You
You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow and, help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.